Hello and welcome to Bedtime History. Tonight, we're not journeying back through the dusty annals of ancient kingdoms or forgotten wars. Instead, we're venturing into a different kind of history that is being written right now in the flickering glow of computer screens and whispered in the dead of night. We're exploring a story that began less than 30 years ago yet has burrowed its way into our collective consciousness with the chilling efficiency of a parasite. It is a story that has no single author, no definitive text, but is known by millions around the world. We are going to analyze the rise of a truly modern urban legend. We're going to talk about the children with black eyes. Imagine it. It's late. The world outside your window has been painted in shades of blue and black for hours. The only sounds are the hum of the refrigerator, the gentle sigh of the house settling, and perhaps the low murmur of a television you've forgotten to turn off. You're comfortable, secure in your sanctuary. Your home is your castle, its walls a barrier against the unpredictability of the outside world. Then a sound cuts through the quiet. A knock at the door. Not a frantic, urgent banging, but a soft, deliberate tap tap tap. It's too late for a friendly neighbor, too gentle for an emergency. A prickle of unease traces a line up your spine. You're not expecting anyone. You tell yourself it's nothing, the wind, a branch, your imagination. But then it comes again. Tap, tap, tap. Polite, yet insistent. Curiosity, tinged with a healthy dose of caution, pulls you from your chair. You move to the door, perhaps peering through the peephole. What you see is puzzling. Standing on your doorstep are two children. They can't be more than 10 or 12 years old. Their clothing is simple, perhaps a little strange, a little out of season. Why would children be out alone at this hour? Are they lost? In trouble? Your initial fear begins to subside, replaced by a sense of concern, a social obligation to help. You might crack the door open, keeping the chain lock fastened. "Can I help you?" you ask. One of the children speaks. The voice is surprisingly flat, monotone, yet articulate. "Let us in," the child says. It's not a question. It's a calm, simple command. "Why?" you ask, your unease returning like a cold tide. "What's wrong?" "We need to use your phone," the other one says, their head slightly bowed, face obscured by shadow. "Our parents will be here soon." The story seems plausible enough, but something feels profoundly wrong. It's a feeling that starts in the pit of your stomach, a primal, irrational dread that screams at you. It's a full-body sense of panic, an instinctual flight or fight response that has no logical source. Your mind races to find a reason for this terror, but there is none. They are just children. Why are you so afraid? The child on the left looks up, and for the first time, you see their face clearly in the dim glow of your porch light. And that's when your blood turns to ice. That's when the world tilts on its axis. The child has no eyes. Not in the way we understand them. There is no white sclera, no colored iris, no dark pupil. There are only two sockets of pure, solid, predatory black. Like a shark's eyes. Like polished obsidian. Voids that seem to drink the light around them and reflect nothing back. "Let us in," the child repeats, their voice unchanged, but the words now carry an impossible weight, a suffocating pressure. Your hand, as if controlled by some outside force, might begin to tremble, moving toward the lock. Every instinct in your body is now a blaring siren. Do not let them in. Do not let them in. This terrifying scenario is the core of one of the most pervasive and chilling digital age myths. The legend of the black-eyed children, or BKs. These are not ghosts in a crumbling castle or monsters from an ancient text. They are a product of our time, born on the nascent internet and nurtured in the dark corners of forums and message boards. Their story represents a unique intersection of folklore, technology, and psychological horror. Tonight, we will trace the complete history of this phenomenon. We will pinpoint the exact moment this legend was born, in a single chilling post written by a Texas journalist in 1996. We will follow its journey as it mutated and spread, becoming a cornerstone of creepypasta origins. We will dissect the anatomy of these unexplained encounters, examining the common threads that run through thousands of alleged reports from across the globe. And finally, we will delve into the most important question of all. Why? Why does this particular story terrify us so profoundly? What deep-seated psychological fears do these soulless black eyes reflect back at us? So lock your doors, draw the curtains, and settle in. We are about to open a door that was never meant to be answered and invite in a story that, once heard, is not easily forgotten. This is the history of the Black-Eyed Children. To understand the Black-Eyed Children, we must travel back to a different era of the internet. Back to 1996. This was a time before Google was a verb, before social media, before smartphones put the world's knowledge in our pockets. The internet was a wilder, more text-based frontier. Communities formed on Usenet newsgroups and primitive email mailing lists. It was a space where information and misinformation could travel with a sense of unfiltered authenticity. It was in this digital primordial soup that the first seed of the BK legend was planted. The man who planted it was a journalist named Brian Bethel. In the summer of 1996, Bethel was living in Abilene, Texas. One evening, he sat down and wrote out an account of two strange encounters he claimed to have experienced. He didn't post it to a paranormal website or a horror fiction group. He posted it to a mailing list for those who had witnessed ghosts, a small niche community where people shared personal experiences. His post was not titled The Black-Eyed Children. It was simply a real-time recounting of something that had deeply disturbed him. His tone wasn't that of a storyteller trying to scare an audience, but of a man trying to make sense of something inexplicable. And that is precisely what made it so effective. Let's reconstruct Bethel's original story because nearly every element of the modern BK mythos is present in this single, foundational text. Bethel's first encounter didn't happen at a secluded house, but in a mundane public space, the parking lot of a movie theater. It was around 9:30 p.m. He was sitting in his parked car, the engine off, writing a check to pay his internet provider. He was using the ambient light from the theater marquee to see. It's a relatable, everyday moment. Suddenly, a knock on his driver's side window. He looked up to see two boys, somewhere between the ages of 9 and 12. His first reaction was fear, but a rational fear. He was startled. He assumed they were coming to ask for money, a common occurrence. He rolled down his window a crack. "Hey, mister, what's up?" the first boy said. Bethel was immediately struck by the boy's voice. It was not the voice of a child. Bethel described it as having a commanding tone, a startling, deep, and confident quality that was completely at odds with his youthful appearance. The boy continued, "We have a problem. We were going to see the movie, Mortal Kombat. But we forgot our money at our mother's house. We need you to give us a ride." Bethel's internal alarms began to sound. Not supernatural alarms, but practical ones. Two kids out late, wanting a ride from a stranger. It was a textbook, stranger danger, red flag, but from the other side. He felt a mix of suspicion and a nagging sense of social responsibility. He began to make excuses. "Oh well, the movie has already started," he said. He pointed out that they would miss the beginning. The boys were unfazed. "It's okay, we can catch the next one," the spokesman said. His confidence was unsettling. Bethel writes that at this point, a wave of overwhelming soul-racking fear washed over him. He described it as an unnatural chemical fear, a terror that had no logical basis. He was a grown man, they were two children. There was no physical threat. Yet, he was seized by a panic so profound, he felt his body was no longer under his complete control. He looked from the spokesman to the second boy, who had been silent, lingering in the background. And that's when he saw their eyes. In his original post, Bethel describes them with haunting clarity, soulless orbs of black. "I was taken aback. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but no. Their eyes were coal black. No pupil, no iris. Just two black, bottomless orbs." The sight of the eyes combined with the inexplicable terror broke his paralysis. His mind was screaming one word, "Leave." The spokesman seemed to sense the shift. His polite, confident demeanor vanished. his face contorted into a mask of anger. "We can't get in your car unless you tell us it's okay," he said, his voice now laced with frustration and menace. "Let us in." Bethel wrote that it felt like they were trying to override his will, that the "let us in" was not just a request but a form of psychic pressure. The fear gave him a surge of adrenaline. Without another word, he threw the car into reverse, tearing out of the parking space and speeding away, not daring to look back. He drove home shaken to his core. He mentioned a second, similar encounter in the same post, involving a man knocking on his door asking about a non-existent person, but it was the story of the two boys in the parking lot that became the genesis of a legend. Let's analyze why this story was so potent. First, the source. Brian Bethel was a known journalist. This wasn't an anonymous troll posting a story for shock value. He had a reputation. He presented the account as a factual, personal experience. This lent it a veneer of credibility that was crucial in its early days. Second, the writing. It's detailed and emotionally resonant. He doesn't just say, "I was scared." He describes the quality of the fear, soul-racking, irrational, a feeling that his hand was moving to unlock the door of its own volition. This level of detail makes the experience feel visceral and real to the reader. Third, and most importantly, the story contains a perfect cocktail of horror elements. It taps into the mundane fear of being approached by strangers, then injects it with the supernatural. It plays on our protective instincts towards children, then violently subverts them. The detail about needing permission to enter "we can't get in unless you tell us it's okay" is a masterstroke. It connects, consciously or not, to ancient folklore traditions. Vampires, demons, and the fae of Celtic legend are often bound by similar rules. They cannot cross a threshold unless invited. This simple line transformed two strange children from potential muggers into something otherworldly and ancient. Bethel's post did not immediately create a worldwide phenomenon. For a couple of years it remained a niche story, shared on paranormal mailing lists and early websites dedicated to the unexplained. It was a piece of digital campfire lore. But the internet was evolving, and with the rise of new platforms, Bethel's chilling account was about to find a much, much larger audience. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw the birth of forums and message boards dedicated specifically to sharing scary stories. This is where we see the beginning of the creepypasta origins of the BK legend. The term creepypasta itself is a portmanteau of creepy and copypasta, which was internet slang for a block of text that gets copied and pasted over and over again. Bethel's story was perfect for this format. It was self-contained, terrifying, and written as a first-person account. People began to copy his story and paste it onto new forums. Sometimes he was credited, often he was not. The story began to detach from its original author and take on a life of its own. It became less Brian Bethel's experience and more a thing that happens. And as it was copied and pasted, it began to change. This is the digital equivalent of the game, telephone, or more accurately, the organic process of folklore creation. Small details were altered, either through misremembering or deliberate embellishment. The setting often shifted from a car in a parking lot to the more intimate and vulnerable setting of a person's home, echoing the intro to our episode. The movie theater became a dark, suburban street. The number of children sometimes changed. The dialogue became more refined, more archetypal. The name was also born in this era. Bethel never called them black-eyed children. That label was applied by the growing online community, a simple, descriptive, and terrifyingly effective brand name. By the mid-2000s, websites like creepypasta.com became centralized archives for this new genre of horror. The BK story was one of its star attractions. It sat alongside other titans of early internet horror like Slender Man and Jeff the Killer. But unlike those, which were often explicitly fictional creations, the BK legend always maintained its thin, tantalizing veil of potential reality. It was always presented as a true account, an unexplained encounter. People began to do more than just share the original story. They began to add to the lore. A new genre of post emerged, the Me Too post. Someone would read Bethel's story, or one of its many variations and then post their own alleged encounter. I thought I was the only one they would write. This happened to me last year. Suddenly, it wasn't just one story from Texas in 1996. It was a pattern. There were reports from Illinois, from California, from the United Kingdom, from Australia. The details were often strikingly similar, which believers pointed to as proof of a genuine phenomenon. Skeptics, of course, saw it as proof of a story's mimetic power. People were simply adapting the existing narrative to their own context, a phenomenon known as ostension, where people begin to imitate the folklore they consume. The rise of YouTube and podcasting in the late 2000s and 2010s poured gasoline on the fire. Narrators with deep, sonorous voices would read these accounts over spooky ambient music. Amateur filmmakers would create short films depicting BK encounters. The legend had achieved full multimedia saturation. It had completed its journey from a single email on a niche mailing list to a global modern urban legend. It had become a self-sustaining ecosystem of fear, a story that now belonged to everyone and to no one. Now that we understand its origins, let's dissect the phenomenon itself. Let's perform an autopsy on the legend and identify the core components that define a classic black-eyed children encounter. While stories vary, a distinct and consistent anatomy has emerged from the thousands of accounts shared online. Recognizing this pattern is key to understanding its psychological grip. First is the setting and the approach. The encounter almost always happens in what should be a place of safety and isolation. Most commonly, it's a person's home, late at night. The second most common location is a person's car, another private, sealed environment. The setting is crucial. The horror comes from the violation of a personal sanctuary. The BKs don't appear in a crowded mall or bright sunny park. They appear at your door on a lonely road, breaching the barrier between your private world and the unknown darkness outside. They bring the threat to you. Second is the children themselves. They are almost always described as being between the ages of 6 and 16. There are typically 2 of them, a detail that dates directly back to Bethel's account. Their clothing is often described as strange, either overly simple, like plain black hoodies, or old-fashioned and out of place, as if they are wearing hand-me-downs from another era. Their skin is often noted as being pale or sallow. But the most consistent descriptor, before the eyes are even seen, is their demeanor. They are unnaturally calm, confident, and articulate for their age. They speak in a flat, emotionless monotone, a stark contrast to the usual lively chatter of children. This creates an immediate sense of unease, a feeling that something is fundamentally off. Third, we have the request. This is the heart of the interaction. The children always ask for something that requires the victim to grant them permission, to make a conscious choice to let them in. The classic request is, "Let us in." Variations include, "We need to use your telephone." "We're lost, can you help us?" Or, as in Bethel's case, "Can you give us a ride?" This element is what elevates the story from a simple monster tale to something more akin to supernatural folklore. It establishes a rule. Their power, it seems, is contingent on your consent. This puts the psychological burden squarely on the victim. The terror isn't just what the children might do, but the horror of what you might allow them to do. Fourth, and perhaps the most critical element from a psychological standpoint, is the unnatural fear. Nearly every single account emphasizes this point. The feeling of dread and panic precedes the reveal of the black eyes. It is described as a primal, animalistic terror that floods the victim's system for no discernible reason. It's not just suspicion. It's a full-blown psychic assault. People report feeling dizzy, nauseous, or paralyzed by a fear so intense it feels alien, as if it's being projected onto them. This is a key component of the psychological horror of the legend. The true threat isn't physical. It's mental and emotional. The fear itself is the first attack. Fifth is the reveal. This is the climax of the encounter. After a few moments of stilted, unsettling conversation, the victim finally gets a clear look at the children's eyes. The descriptions are remarkably consistent. They are solid black. No whites, no irises, no pupils. They are often described as voids, shark eyes, or pools of ink. The sight of these eyes acts as the confirmation of the unnatural fear the victim is already experiencing. It's the moment the mask drops, and the subconscious dread is given a terrifying concrete form. It validates the terror, proving it was not an overreaction. Finally, there's the aftermath. If the victim resists the urge to let them in, the children's demeanor often changes dramatically. The polite, monotone facade crumbles, replaced by anger, frustration, and menace. Their insistence grows more forceful. "You have to let us in," they might say. Eventually, when it becomes clear the victim will not yield, they simply leave. They turn and walk away into the darkness, or in some accounts, vanish instantly. The victim is left shaken, traumatized. Many reports mention lingering effects: nightmares, a newfound paranoia, an unshakable fear of being home alone. Some even report physical symptoms in the days following, like unexplained nosebleeds or feelings of profound exhaustion, as if the encounter had drained them of vital energy. One of the most famous post-Bethel accounts, which perfectly illustrates this structure, comes from a man on an online forum who identified himself as Cannon Chase. He claimed that in the late 1990s, he and his wife were living in a rural home in Vermont. One winter night, a young boy knocked on their door. The boy asked to come in and warm up. Chase's wife was immediately ready to let him in, but Chase felt that same inexplicable wave of terror. He refused. The boy became more insistent. Then two other figures appeared out of the darkness behind the boy, two tall men in black suits with the same solid black eyes. Chase slammed and bolted the door. For the next hour, he claimed, they circled the house, testing windows and doors before finally disappearing. Whether this account is true or simply a creative embellishment on the growing legend, it demonstrates how the core component, the safe setting, the strange child, the simple request, the unnatural fear, and the reveal had become the standardized template for a BK encounter. The story had developed its own set of rules, its own recognizable folklore grammar, which allowed it to be retold and reinterpreted endlessly, all while retaining its terrifying core identity. We have traced the what and the how. We've seen the legend's birth and we've dissected its anatomy. But now we arrive at the most compelling question: why? Why has this particular modern urban legend become so powerful? What is it about the image of a child with black eyes that triggers such a deep and resonant fear in the modern psyche? The answer is not simple. It lies at the intersection of psychology, sociology, and the ancient art of storytelling. The most immediate and obvious explanation is a scientific concept known as the uncanny valley. Coined by robotics professor Masahiro Mori in 1970, the uncanny valley describes our emotional response to things that look and act almost human, but not quite. When a robot is clearly a robot, we're fine with it. When an android is perfectly indistinguishable from a human, we're also fine with it. But in the space between the valley, where something is very close to human but with subtle, unsettling flaws, our reaction is one of revulsion and fear. The black-eyed children are perfect residents of the uncanny valley. They have the form of a child, a shape we are biologically programmed to find non-threatening and even endearing. But their behavior is wrong. Their speech is flat and monotone. Their logic is alien. Their movements are sometimes described as stiff or unnatural. And then the eyes. The eyes are the ultimate uncanny trigger. They are the single feature that takes something familiar, a child's face, and makes it profoundly, monstrously alien. The lack of a sclera, the white part of the eye, is particularly disturbing. We subconsciously use the whites of people's eyes to gauge their emotional state, their health, and where they are looking. Removing that removes a key part of their perceived humanity, leaving only a predatory, unreadable void. Beyond the uncanny valley, the legend preys on a much deeper, more culturally ingrained fear: the subversion of innocence. Across cultures and throughout history, children represent hope, purity, the future, and vulnerability. They are the ultimate symbol of something that must be protected. Horror works most effectively when it takes a symbol of safety and security and corrupts it. Think of the possessed child in The Exorcist, the creepy twins in The Shining, or the sinister children in Village of the Damned. The BK legend does this with brutal efficiency. It turns the very symbol of innocence into a predator. The thing that should be asking for our help is actually a threat. The being we are meant to protect is trying to harm us. This inversion of our most basic protective instincts creates a powerful cognitive dissonance, a deep and unsettling horror. The legend is also a supernatural evolution of a very real modern anxiety, stranger danger. The moral panics of the 1980s and 90s, fueled by media reports of child abductions, instilled a powerful sense of ambient fear in society. The mantra was, "Don't talk to strangers." The BK legend takes this familiar fear and gives it a supernatural twist. What's more terrifying than a stranger trying to lure you into a car? A strange child trying to lure their way into your home, armed not with a weapon, but with some kind of psychic compulsion and a gaze that promises oblivion. It's stranger danger for an audience that has grown up, but has not outgrown the fear. It taps into our modern sense of isolation and mistrust, the feeling that even in our own homes, we are not truly safe from the darkness outside. This ties into the core of the legend's psychological horror. The fear is intimate and invasive. The BKs don't just want to scare you, they want something from you. They want in. This could be interpreted literally into your house, into your care, or metaphorically. They want into your mind, into your soul. The insistence on being invited in is key. It implies a transaction. By consenting, you are not just a victim of a random attack. You become a participant in your own downfall. This internal conflict, the battle between your rational mind telling you to help these children and your primal instinct screaming in terror, is where the real horror lies. It's a horror of violated will. But the black-eyed children are not an entirely new idea. While their specific form is a product of the digital age, they stand on the shoulders of giants. They are the latest iteration of ancient archetypes that have haunted humanity for millennia. If we look back at older folklore, we find their ancestors everywhere. Think of the Fae or fair folk of Celtic and European mythology. The Fae were not the tiny, glittering fairies of Disney movies. They were powerful, amoral, and dangerous otherworldly beings. They often appeared in human guise but were betrayed by a subtle flaw. Perhaps they had no shadow, or their feet were backwards. They were known for abducting humans, especially children, and leaving behind a changeling, a fairy creature that looked identical to the human child but was emotionally cold, strange, and often sickly. The BK's monotone speech, pale skin, and otherworldly nature echo the changeling myth perfectly. Furthermore, the Fae were often bound by rules of hospitality. An offering of food or an invitation across a threshold could give them power over you. We can also see parallels with vampires. The classic vampire, from Bram Stoker's Dracula to modern interpretations, famously cannot enter a home unless invited. This trope, which Brian Bethel's account stumbled upon so perfectly, gives the victim a fragile sliver of power and makes the act of invitation a moment of supreme, terrifying significance. Even the concept of demonic entities fits the mold. Many mythologies feature trickster spirits or demons who take on an innocent appearance: a lost traveler, a beautiful woman, or a helpless child to test or tempt a human. Their goal is to gain entry, to corrupt, and to feed on human fear or life force. The BKs, with their demand for entry and the draining effect they have on their victims, fit neatly into this ancient tradition of the deceiver at the door. So, what are the black-eyed children? Are they a genuine, unexplained paranormal phenomenon? Are they a modern incarnation of ancient folkloric beings? Or are they simply a ghost story, a powerful meme created and sustained by the unique architecture of the internet? Ultimately, the answer may not matter. The power of a story does not depend on its literal truth. The power of the BK legend lies in what it reflects about us. It is a perfect storm of modern and ancient fears. It combines the digital age fear of viral information and the loss of privacy with the timeless, primal fear of the dark. It weaponizes the uncanny valley, subverts our most sacred symbol of innocence, and plays on our deep-seated anxieties about trust, safety, and the violation of our personal space. The black-eyed children are a mirror. When we look into their solid black eyes, we don't see a monster. We see a reflection of our own modern fears. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the other, who looks almost like us, and the terrifying realization that the walls we build to keep the world out may not be as strong as we think. They are a story that reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world is a simple knock at the door. We began our journey tonight in the imagined safety of a quiet home, only to have that peace shattered by a simple, polite knock. We traveled back to the dawn of the public internet, to a single, chilling email written by a Texas journalist that accidentally birthed a phenomenon. We watched as that single story was copied, pasted, and transformed by the digital hive mind, evolving from one man's unexplained encounter into a global modern urban legend. We've dissected the legend's anatomy, identifying the tropes that make it so consistent and recognizable, from the monotone requests for entry to the soul-freezing reveal of those empty, black eyes. We've explored the deep-seated fears it preys upon, the psychological horror of the uncanny valley, the corruption of innocence, and the echoes of ancient myths about vampires and fae who need our permission to do us harm. The story of the Black-Eyed Children is, in many ways, the perfect case study of how a modern myth is made. It demonstrates that folklore is not a dead thing confined to old books. It is a living, breathing process that is happening all around us right now. The internet has become our global campfire, and stories like the BKs are the tales we tell to articulate the anxieties of our time. Whether you believe these children are real entities wandering the lonely backroads of the world, or simply a powerful and self-replicating story, their impact is undeniable. They have carved out a permanent space in our collective nightmares. They are a testament to the enduring human need to tell stories about the darkness that lies just beyond the porch light. So, the next time you find yourself home alone on a quiet night, and you hear an unexpected sound at your door, pause for a moment. Think of the story you've heard tonight. Think of the polite voices, the simple request, and the unnatural, overwhelming fear. Think of what you might see if you look through the peephole. And ask yourself what you would do. Would you open the door? This brings us to the end of our history for tonight. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. What are your theories on the Black-Eyed Children phenomenon? Do you think there's a paranormal reality behind the legend? Or is it purely a product of internet folklore? Have you ever had an experience you couldn't explain? Or heard a local version of this story? I invite you to share your thoughts, your theories, and your own stories in the comments below. The history of these legends is still being written, and your voice is a part of it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker corners of modern folklore and human psychology, please consider subscribing to Bedtime History. We have many more journeys to take into the past and into the shadows to uncover the stories that shape our world. Thank you for listening, and sleep well, if you can.